Okay, so welcome everyone who's attending this session today. So,
Okay.
Mitrabina, I had MBA admissions at the Red Pen, and I'd love if you could give our audience a brief introduction before we begin our session.
Thanks, Natasha, and thanks for this opportunity. I'm super excited for today. So, as I've written INSEAD 16D, but let me just introduce myself. So, professionally, I'm a chartered accountant, and I graduated from INSEAD in 2016. I started my work career in 2008, where I had my own. I had co-founded a company which was more or less into sourcing artisan products back in the days when Amazons and Flipkarts were not very popular. And post that, I worked with Jindal Steel, post qualifying CA, and there I worked in finance teams and had a rotational role. And then I worked with City for 2 years. It was then that I decided to pursue MBA because I wanted to be a bit out of accounting roles and I wanted to have a more visibility towards business and strategy roles. And it was a wonderful 1 year in 2016. Post INSEAD, I got placed at Intel in their leadership development role, which was an Asia, like it was very Asia based. So I traveled around APAC, whether it was China, Malaysia, India. And this was for good almost 4.5 years. And post Intel, I worked for a startup called Grey Orange, where they were setting up, they were undergoing a hyper growth phase. It's a SaaS and automation company. Basically, they have the bots which automates fulfillment centers. And post that, basically, I had a short stint at Vodafone, and now I'm based in Saudi. So I'm overseeing strategy and finance at a company called Lucidi out here. Thank you. Natasha, you're on mute.
So, welcome, Mitrabina. So,
Thank you.
I think for the benefit of today's audience, I'm going to give you a bit of a sense of how our discussion is going to flow. Mitrabina and I are, going to talk about various elements of INSEAD. We're going to talk about what makes a good fit for INSEAD, who is a good fit for INSEAD, what is INSEAD looking for. We'll break down the admissions process and we're going to talk about how each part of your application is really going to give the school a great picture of who you are. So, how can you make the most and really of each element of the application and position elements of who you are in a way that doesn't sound repetitive, that is complementing each element on your resume. So stick with us. We're going to talk about that. And another thing is please keep adding your questions to the chat box. We're hoping to cover a lot of ground. This discussion is going to be free flowing. And we can address the comments that come our way during the discussion as well. So just keep adding your comments. So I think we're really good. I'm grateful to have someone who is a qualified chartered accountant, has global experience, understands entrepreneurship, and there's just going to be so much that we will cover in today's discussion. I think before we start, I do want to take a moment and acknowledge that while INSEAD has always been a school that is top of mind for applicants to like leading global school, business schools, this year also is slightly different. One of the things that we always talk to applicants about in every year is having a comprehensive application strategy, and that typically involves dream, target, and safety schools. This year, that strategy is really going to be taken to the next level because not only are we asking you to look at dream, target, and safety, but we're also asking you to look at hedging your bets across geographies. So typically, when people look at their dream schools, they tend to focus on a single geography and then they tend to apply to schools across that geography. This year, we're seeing a lot of individuals come and talk to us about what it means to apply to something outside of the normal, something outside of what they've typically considered. And INSEAD and European schools and INSEAD primarily tends to be a destination that is highly sought after. So during this conversation, I think it will help us to, or it will help attendees to really understand how they need to think about MBA in Europe. What does that mean? And how does INSEAD's really unique format and approach to the MBA. What does that entail? What does that mean for you? And I think it will be good for us to talk about the unique format that INSEAD has for its MBA first. Um, some of the things that will of course come to mind is the fact that has two campuses. So where do you put in your preference? Does that preference make a difference? But first, let's talk about the program format, the two entry points, and what are the key differentiators between those two entry points. So Mitrina, I think one of the things I'd like to start with is just get a sense of what INSEAD's, the duration of the program means, and if you could just walk us through what that year would look like for someone, the year that they're at INSEAD.
Yeah, thank you, Natasha. That's a great question. I think I would just like to start off with, who does INSEAD really looks for, and then kind of run into the program. So I think
That's
that would
great. Yeah.
probably be helpful if I can cover it right now. So there are
Yeah.
always a lot of questions that, oh, what is INSEAD really looking for? And in my observation, I feel INSEAD looks for somebody who's globally minded, has international experiences, intellectually curious, and also establish them as emotional intelligent leaders. And what I mean by that is somebody who's kind of done work which has impacted not just your numbers and profitability and revenues in your company, but also how has it impacted people. So if you bring out this profile of yours, I think INSEAD is really going to love you. And yes, it has two intakes, one in August and one in January. Primarily both course wise, curriculum wise, it's same. So you have like P1, P2, P3, and P4 and P5. Yeah. So
Five
basically 2 months
periods
if
essentially.
5 periods. Correct.
Yeah.
But the difference between the Jan intake and the August intake is that the Jan intake has an internship of 2 months. Where typically, if you're not sure, if you want to try out consulting, you're coming from banking, you want to try out consulting, or you want to try out like a startup, and you want to explore the places in Europe or Asia, it's really valuable for those candidates because they will get a chance to network with recruiters, and try their hand out in the new career. And the J term, which is the intake, which is in August, and they typically graduate faster by 2 months because they don't have the internship, is more for people who have their goals ready, who have a lot of clarity and don't want to really stay out of their work for like a long time. So it's, I think, ROIs, it's fantastic. But yes, I think in terms of fast pacedness, both are extremely fast paced. So yeah, it's like 2 year curriculum just condensed into 10-month program. So you have to be very agile and be top of things. Yeah, and that is what the program duration is. I hope all the questions got answered. Is there something that was
I
left?
actually had a couple of questions.
Yeah.
I think one of the ways in which INSEAD positions itself is really as a business school for the world. You have an incredibly diverse cohort of students,
Right.
and even when you look at opportunities, it tends to be, one of the questions we typically get asked, and we see a lot of on GMAT Club forums as well, is really about what opportunities look like post MBA opportunities. Do they tend to be global? Do they tend to be Europe centric? I just wanted to understand what your experience has been.
Right. Yeah, this is a great question because it causes a lot of confusion and people like, should I select a global campus? Should I select a France campus? And just to kind of give an idea, so yeah, rightly said, INSEAD is a very global school and it has network all across the globe. And last I heard, 80 nationalities and you get placed in like 170 countries. Now, what that really means for you is, yeah. So if you have a preference, like if I want to get placed in Asia, I will say the recruitment happens during a particular period. Whether you're in Asia or France doesn't make that much of a difference because literally during my time, I was sitting for an interview with a company in France, and I was given the interview from Asia campus. And when I qualified the first round, I got flown to their headquarters in Switzerland, and that is how it happened. So it doesn't matter whether you're sitting in Asia or you're sitting in the Singapore campus or the Fontainebleau campus. And I had similar experiences where I was interviewing for a company in Fontainebleau, and one of of my peers got flown in from Asia, the Singapore campus, and she interviewed. So all these things, yes, managing time wise, or the time zones, it becomes easier. Suppose I want to interview for majority of the European companies, so time wise it's better. And say some of the recruiters cannot really sponsor your travel, so you have to go and visit their location and give the interview and do a meeting or greeting. It works out for them. But overall, all the big companies, definitely it doesn't really matter, because if you qualify for their requirements, you definitely can interview from any place. And in terms of recruiting, I think I do know of some peers who made a transition to even roles in US. But that said, majority of the recruitments happen in Europe, APAC, and I would say Middle East is something lately that is booming. US, while the network is limited, I would say it's not impossible. People did find their way to get recruited in the US also. That is a smaller percentage. Yeah.
Okay. And I think one of the interesting things that we wanted to also bring up, or I wanted to bring up, is the opportunity for an exchange with other schools, or spending a semester, or in this case periods, in other geographies. Now I know that opportunities to do or to participate in such programs do exist between the third and the fifth period. But is there anything that you'd also want to mention specifically? Because I think some of the opportunities are brilliant, right? Like there are opportunities to have an exchange program
Absolutely.
with Kellogg. So I just want you to just tell us about that as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a good question again, because a lot of people probably are not aware of this. So a lot of people know that, okay, you can exchange the campuses. So typically the P1 and the P2 is fixed, where you have the core curriculum, and then you start the bidding process. So you have all these points, and you bid them for the campus change and as well as the elective selection. So say somebody wants to move around campuses, they typically start bidding from P3 onwards. And these are for the campuses of Fontainebleau, Singapore, and Abu Dhabi. Yeah, but that said, also the opportunity to do an exchange program with Wharton, Kellogg, and lately Siebes also, the option is there, and these are fantastic opportunities. So I remember a couple of my peers who wanted to look out for opportunities in US. They went for an exchange program at Kellogg and Wharton. And at the same time, there were a couple of students from Wharton. I happened to visit on the campus, and it was a fantastic exchange of ideas, and kind of immerse yourself with the truly, again, further diverse cohort. And uh, basically, what I heard is, I mean, during my time there was an issue. I mean, you had to get sponsored, and only if you had a
Yeah.
green card, there were certain roles you would get placed. But otherwise, you can apply to the job roles, jobs which are even posted on, say, the internal portals of these schools in the US, or say SEEPs for that matter. So you have an access to the network across all these geographies through these schools. So again, it's a fantastic opportunity. Vice versa, also, I remember somebody from SEEPs had come in, and he cracked this Amazon interview through INSEAD. I so I think it's all about thinking what do you really want and really going for it, and then something definitely works out.
Yeah. We're beginning to see a lot of interesting questions in the chat box. So just keep those coming, because, we're going to address a lot of the admission related questions in a little while. So I can see one around international experience, which I'm going to address, and Mitrabina will bring that up in conversation. But, just if you have more questions, just add that, because we're going to start talking about the admissions process soon. Another thing, Mitrabina, I wanted to also touch on the element of mentorship, because one of the things that people often emphasize when they're talking about like a 2-year program versus a 1-year program is the additional opportunity to network on campus, to form relationships with mentors, and really benefit from those extended contact availability of people, as well as a contact period. I just also want to touch on how INSEAD views the concept of mentorship, and what are the kind of opportunities people will have. And primarily, given the way how intense the program is going to be over a 10-month period, is mentorship really going to be a priority that people can invest in?
Hmm. Yeah, so this one is an interesting question, and I would say maybe just sharing from my experience, because the cohort is a very well, knit cohort, and especially like I've heard people who are in Singapore, they would just like travel over the weekends to an island, and that bonding that is done, versus in France where you have these chateau parties, and again, similar level of bonding but kind of a different vibe to it, so that you can choose which vibe you like better. But why I brought this up is because at the end of the day, it becomes a very close, cohesive network, right? When I came back to India, this was a network that I reached out to for anything. Like if it was a simple thing, hey, listen, how where can I find a nanny? Like as simple as that. So I'm just trying this because with mentoring, again, it's nothing. It's something that is not formalized by the school. There's no formal mentoring or mentorship program that is in place, but it is more like, hey, you know what, let me connect you with my senior who's, if I want to get into a SaaS company and if I have no clue what this is about, I'll just reach out to my friend who's in consulting, and via they'll probably connect me to a network, and that is how mentoring opportunities are there. Again, it is what you make out of your network, but as such, uh, if you're talking about the CDC, which is the Career Development Center, they're very supportive. But apart from
Yeah.
that, there's no formal mentoring program. Now, let me come to the CDC part. I think that will be also of a
Let's
lot of
yeah,
interest to
let's
the
talk about that.
listeners.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So CDC typically they have sector-wise, function-wise experts out there. So say, I was coming from a banking experience and I wanted to get into FMCG retail or like the industry in general. So I reached out to somebody who was an expert in those sectors. And that person typically made me do a soul reflection course. What I meant by that is, she asked me like, okay, what are the transferable skill sets that you get? What is your prior experience? Why do you really want to get into this? Because a lot of times
Yeah.
we think that, hey, listen, I want to get into this, but pata chala ki, it's something that probably doesn't fit me. So you'll have an comprehensive exercise for that, and then once you're a fit, they will help you with certain recruiters, I would say. Not like, hey, just call the person and you'll get a job, not like that, but they will guide you that, okay, you know what, these are our alums that we have, and these are the recruiters that we have, why don't you reach out to them? And then again, it is up to you to kind of make the most of that. Because I remember during my time, I wanted to get into the FMCG sector, and then I had a bunch of names, and I went and visited them. And of course, NCR seniors and alums are very warm because they've gone through the same journey and they know the struggles and hardships, right? So they're extremely supportive. I'm not saying that something guaranteed works out, but definitely you have like a whole network of people to help you out in making the transition that you want.
Yeah. And one of the things we do here is how connected the INSEAD network is. And recently, we were speaking to Jennifer Liu from the admissions team, and she even spoke about like the development of an app where INSEAD alumni in a particular city, if you're traveling to a city, for example, you can connect with so many individuals who you can put yourself out there, you can make connections with other alumni in that particular city. So I think there's a lot that the school is also doing to facilitate connections, I think, for not just the cohort but even for alumni. So I think let's I think I
Right.
can see a lot of questions coming in, Mitrubina. So we'll move on slightly because I do want to cover a lot of ground on the admissions front as well. So I think let's shift gears slightly. I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the things we need to talk about before we actually get to admissions, because this is something that comes up very often, is what is the kind of person that would find their fit in INSEAD. And there are two things which typically come in, and I'm not sure those are the only two things we want to discuss, but two things which come up are the years of experience, like when is a good time to apply to INSEAD. And the second piece is typically about the international exposure, like who is the person that in INSEAD looks for, because one of the questions that you see on the form is really wanting to understand international exposure, even in a more structured manner, like it's on the application form. And it's something that adcoms tend to talk about when they're talking about it. Like one important admissions criteria that they will talk about is the kind of international exposure you have pre-MBA. So I think let's cover both. I think one of the things that we'll first talk about is definitely like in terms of experience, like when is the right time to apply to INSEAD. And even if you look at the class statistics, you'll typically find that the average years of work X tends to be like 5 years or higher. And I do have a theory that this also depends on like what you want to gain from the program, given how condensed it is. You need to be at a stage of your career where you'll benefit from the pace of the program, as well as the kind of discussions that you would be expected to have during that during that very condensed time frame, as well as the motivation that you have to be out of the program in a 10-month period and rejoin the workforce. So I just want to understand your conversations that you've had with mentees or you've had with people seeking admission about when is the right time to apply to NCR.
Right. Yeah, that's a very valid question because a lot of times people think, oh, are we too old? Oh, are we too new, etc. And yeah, the site will probably say 5, 6 years is the ideal time. I would say why that condition is there, like you rightly pointed out, Natasha, and let me just elaborate on that. When you
Yeah.
are in these classroom discussions with your other peers, you really need to have that professional maturity and that emotional maturity to really understand what is being discussed, right? When if we have case studies typically, right? When the cases are being discussed, to make the most out of it, you must have also had to go through a professional rigor to actually make the most of the offering. So as a result, somebody with 4 plus 5 plus years of experience is able to grasp the problem statement and really think from the person's shoes and kind of solve cases and understand these business problems holistically. So while yes, 5 to 6 years is like an ideal time, like professional experience is an ideal experience to kind of apply. I did have exceptionally talented peers who were also 4 years, yeah. And I remember one of them was a CA ranker, is a CA ranker. The other one, she was from Georgia and she was fantastic, like clarity of thought, etc. So I would say that don't kind of restrain yourself that, oh, you know what, I'm on the younger side or something. If you've demonstrated that professional maturity and you are probably going to be, you're poised or, you're fully confident to make the most of the offering and get placed and do justice to career, definitely I would suggest go ahead and apply. At the same time, I also want to cover, a lot of people have these queries that, oh, I think we are too old for MBA. Again, is is what have you it's not about the number of years. Yes, maybe somebody with like say 12 years plus, you need to think about how you will benefit from the program and add to the class. But sometimes just because say you're a 7 year old or an 8 year old experienced professional, uh, don't kind of just write it off, because at the end of the day, I feel there's a lot to learn from the program, lot to benefit from the network. Definitely don't shy back and say that, listen, okay, I think I'm on the higher side of the experience. It's again, how much of impact have you demonstrated in the workplace? What international mindset are you getting to the class? How much can you contribute to the classroom? Think about all those. And I would say somewhere from 4 to 8 years is quite ideal for applying to INSEAD. And this is what my cohort also comprised of.
Cool.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right.
And
And,
I, yeah.
no, I just want to just add a point here because you mentioned something very relevant. It's also about how much do you think you're going to benefit from classroom discussions. And I think when you have 10 or 10 years plus work experience, that is a question that you need to think about and look for answers even when you speak to students who are on campus. Because if you are, because your years of experience are not just a number, it's also about where you will be in your career at that point in time. I have worked with clients who have been accepted with 10 years work experience, but those are highly individual conversations. And one of the things that we do advise clients to understand is what is the specific value that an MBA holds for them at that stage of their career. It is possible, by the way, for someone who's slightly on the older side, and again I'm going to say 10 years plus because I do see those questions in the chat box. It is entirely possible that you may fit the mold more for a Gemba program, looking at INSEAD as your base, or rather than just going for a regular MBA program. And my advice in such cases is to reach out to the admissions team and have a very frank conversation about the value that you seek to gain from the MBA, because it's not just about the degree, but it's also about the value at that stage of your life. So for anyone with 10 years plus, I think you do need to schedule a conversation, understand the value that the MBA degree will hold for you. Or is there another offering at the school that you intend to apply to, including INSEAD, which might suit your needs better? So I
Yeah,
just want to put that
Natasha.
out there.
Yeah, sorry, there are so many questions I see on the years. So somebody who's asking 10 years, yeah, there have been candidates. In fact, in my year only, there was somebody who had 10 years experience, but that person had like a very specific, he had a very niche skill set. And in fact, he had got placed into a consulting firm. Uh, Again, I don't want to take names because to each their own, and he fit that, and fit that role, and he was placed in the engagement manager role, right? So you never know, because this will require probably a bit of reflection from your end in terms of, okay, how can I even make the most of, not only make the most of MBA, how will it
Yeah,
be for the post MBA recruitments, where can I really see myself, right?
yeah,
Because that is also something that one should consider. So I think it's case to case
yeah.
basis decision, and it's again something not impossible at all. Just because I'm 10 years and there's no point in applying. If it's a benefiting you, then definitely think of it.
Yeah, and I think I saw the word red flag with that question. I definitely don't think it's a red flag. It's just about being able to justify why it's important at this stage of your career. I don't think it's something that's necessarily looked at with a negative lens. But yes, especially when there are other offerings more suited to mid-career professionals, that this, you might benefit from just having a better discussion with the school before you choose to apply. So I think with that, Mitrabina, I'd like to jump a little bit now to actual admissions, because that will be something that's top of mind for a lot of people. INSEAD's round two is at the start of November, and then we also have questions around what the school looks for, or what round people should apply in right now. So I think one of the things that I do want to cover, because this will be the base for a lot of the discussion that we're going to have right now, are typically, what are the four criteria that INSEAD is looking at. And the reason I want to mention it is, we do have conversations with INSEAD admissions officers. There's even one which is on the Red Pen's YouTube channel, where we've had a very, very detailed conversation with INSEAD AdCom. And I think we go into a lot of depth over there as well. So it's worth checking out if you have INSEAD on your mind. But the four criteria that INSEAD has very strongly spoken about, that what do they look for in an applicant, is really four things. So one is academic performance, and their ability to really absorb from the classroom. The second is, of course, international motivation. The third is the ability to contribute to the cohort. And the fourth is leadership potential. Now, every part of the application, of the essays, of subjective questions, and the video essays as well, is going to look at how you address each of these four criteria. And I think, if we can just go over some of the more obvious ones, and, Mitrabina, I'd like to pick your brain on a couple of them first. So one is, of course, academic performance, and this will be looking at your undergrad scores, looking at your test scores. Is there a perfect test score? No, not really. We've also had individuals who are just not great standardized test takers. They've got brilliant academic records, but they may not be the greatest GMAT scorer or GRE scorer get in. But typically, you do need to realize that schools will look at a combination of factors. They will scrutinize your transcripts, and that is something where you need to be able to show them that you have the academic readiness, that you will be able to thrive in a highly competitive and extremely intense program. But the one that I also want to talk to you about a little bit, Mitrabina, is this international motivation. Like I mentioned, the form does ask you in terms of the depth of your exposure to other cultures, if you've stayed in other geographies, if you've worked in other geographies. I just want to understand how international exposure really plays out when you are actually a part of the program.
Yeah,
Is it
this
more
is
that you
something
focus?
that is a lot stressed about. Right, right. And maybe before answering the question, I'll just give a background. So basically, like I already mentioned in the starting, as per stats, I remember during my time, I think it was around 75 nationalities, which has become 80 nationalities now. And you get placed in 170 countries. And what does this really mean for you? If you are somebody who traveled, and I'm not saying by just traveling countries, if you don't have that international mindset, you won't be really making the most of the program because it might be a bit intimidating for some people because you'll have people from diverse nationalities sitting in the cafeteria and talking in accents you probably won't understand, right? So that's the first visual optics where I'm just talking, but what it means deeper is having those conversations, right? Having those professional conversations, having that outlook that, hey, listen, yeah, I want to have an international career. You should demonstrate that. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to, in a way, kind of apply for the program and get intimidated and not make the most of it, right? And in fact, during P1 and P2, we are in a study group where the algorithm just magically, or that's what an algorithm does, but it kind of maps us out with 5 or 6 member team where nobody's of the same nationality or the same function as you are. So I was the Indian banker in my team, and I didn't have anybody Indian or who was remotely even related to finance in my study group. So that is why you need to really speak the language of international mobility, right? So that is why you must demonstrate in your profile, whether that is through your application, through your resume, through the essays, it must come out strongly that you're very comfortable in this environment and make the most of it, right? What that means is, yes, INSEAD specifically asks, like there's a page dedicated towards, okay, what are your international experiences? And you list down the locations and etc. and for what reasons. But also try to write through your essays that, okay, I've interacted with these nationalities. Again, not in a checklist manner, but more like, what are your learnings by interacting
Insights,
with them?
comfort. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So whether you're interacting, leading, or even if it's your managers, who you're interacting with, just demonstrate that, and that itself is enough. And also, a lot of times, I mean, nowadays travels become very easy. My time it was not that easy, but still, like a lot of people have these travels. Again, writing that I've traveled to like 30 countries and all that, it's not something that probably I would encourage to write. Not because schools are looking, okay, you've traveled 30 countries, but what have you learned from your travels, right? If you visit a specific country, how have you immersed yourself? Bringing out those insights is really helpful because again, it'll show the school some comfort that, okay, you're very comfortable, in an international setup, right? And I can take my example also. So for me, I used to travel. I started traveling for work through study group, and that was something recent. But I also had a lot of childhood travels because my father was in merchant navy, and it was not about visiting different countries. I had picked up certain aspect, like I had started playing table tennis and then participated in like nationals and all, because my father used to interact a lot with these people from Philippines, and for them, how cricket is to India, TT is to them, right? So I had weaved a story around that, and I think it just worked for me at that time because I felt I had limited international exposure. So what I mean to say is that just really reflect on any international interaction that you've had or a travel that you had, and bring out what you learned from it and how you can contribute to the classroom setup at INSEAD. So I
Yeah.
hope it answers the question.
Yeah, yeah. No, it does. I think that also brings me to the next criteria, which is related, which is the ability to contribute. I think the ability to contribute becomes, that much more like understanding your proven ability to contribute becomes that much more important when you're looking at a really short program, because your ability to work within scenarios, your ability to, really form connections in a very short period of time, and meaningful connections, that it becomes that much more important. So I think it's self-explanatory why that skill would be needed, but and we're also going to just talk about how you're going to talk about those in essays, but yes, the fourth one, as what the leadership potential, I think that is something that is expected in any competitive MBA program, and I think INSEAD's no different. I do want to now just move to the actual application process, because there are so many unique things that INSEAD does, both when putting the application together, as well as the video essays, and now the written essay, the live written essay that applicants have to give. So I just would want to maybe talk about the written essays, as well as the video essay component as well. And if you have questions around that, please do add it to the chat box as well. But INSEAD, I think, has experimented with a couple of formats for video for written essays. There used to be 6 essays, then there used to be 5 essays. Now we are at 2 job essays, 2 motivational essays, and they're really combining the best of some of the elements from the earlier video essays, the earlier written essays. So now we have two job essays. So the first one is really about is centered around the element of choice, right? Like, what have you done since you graduated? And then it comes down to what are you doing in your current role. This is a great essay to really talk about the breadth and the depth of your career. So the choices you've made, how you have progressed with every single choice that you have made going forward. And then talking about your current role, I think, is a good way to root that answer in the present. Like, where are you at this stage of your career? Because yeah, it is something that will inform the goal statement that follows, right? Like, where do you want to be? How is INSEAD going to be a part of that journey? So I think that is a brilliant essay for someone to just take stock of all the career decisions they've made up to this point. And I think that melds well with the next essay, which is really about what are your short and long term career goals? Where do you want to be in terms of geography, industry, function? I think that is really, really specific to your short term goals. And then you want to talk about how do you want to bridge the gap between where you are in your career today to where you want to be in the future. So it's really a very typical goal statement, but you have about 800 words between the two essays to really put together a meaningful pitch. And I know a lot of people applying to INSEAD Mitrabina will want to understand from you as an alumna what they should be doing. But are there any tips that you typically have for someone applying to INSEAD and talking about themselves in these essays?
Yeah. I feel there's a lot of challenge in these questions, and rightly said. Previously, it was like a long list of questions which would intimidate a lot of people, and I feel it's a positive and it works for your benefit because it really makes you think while applying to the program, what am I applying for, and what am I going to get out of it at the same time. So now, of course, they've concised and kind of made all those questions. I think the questions are same. They've just like made it combined it with each other. So the reflection is still there. So you still have to answer those questions. So I think the challenge out here is a lot of people feel like, okay, how do I present myself when if they are asking for leadership skills, do we have to like lead a team of 300 member, or do we have to get a portfolio of like manage a portfolio of like whatever, I don't know, like $1 million portfolio size? Or I would say not really, because a lot of us probably don't have exposure to those cream level jobs before MBA, and for some even after MBA. It takes some time to go there. But what is important is you really demonstrate that you have that leadership outlook. And by that, what I mean that, okay, let me just take a hypothetical example. If I'm doing a data entry job, am I just talking about data entry and how to make my Excel sheet sufficient? No, I'm really plugging into putting that, okay, listen, I'm doing this data entry and this is probably going to feed into the supply chain management details, which is in turn going to help the company to, make its supply chain more efficient and pour in more revenue and all that, etc. So bring out that leadership outlook where you really look at business top down and trying to link that, okay, this is what I do and this is what impact I want to make. So leadership experience is important, but yeah, it's not, that doesn't mean that you have to lead a team or something. That leadership outlook is important. Yeah. Secondly, make sure that you have those transferable skills that come out, right? So say I want to get into strategy or something, but I haven't done something remotely related to strategy. Maybe that's analytical skill sets, or maybe that's kind of collaboration skill sets, right? which is needed in these strategy roles post MBA, structured thinking, right? So bring out those elements somehow in your work profile, that this is what I do in my work day to day basis, and this is so subtly you're kind of calling it out that hey, listen, I have the transferable skills to kind of achieve what goals I have in mind, right? Thirdly, I would highly recommend to quantify, because a lot of times people feel that okay, how do I bring out my impact? Quantification really helps, and not like okay, I'm leading a 3-member team or something like that. I'm working towards this project, and even if you're not heading the vertical, or if it even if it is not assigned, say the vertical's AUM is X million dollars or whatever, or maybe this is kind of entering the sustainability sector, right? It automatically kind of helps the adcoms to understand okay, what is the importance, or where are you placed, and how you are really typically navigating the work sector, right? And I think lastly, what I would want to say is just be a bit specific about what you want to achieve. Sorry, I think. So I was speaking. Yeah, you can hear me, right? I was saying, mentioning what specificity, because at times, yeah, I was saying that, you don't really need to say that, hey, I want to become a consultant at McKinsey at in so and so team doing this. Okay, that level of specificity is something which I would say is not really needed. But at the same time, if you want to say, listen, after graduating, maybe I want to open my own firm or work in consulting, that is something which is fine, but it could be a misleading if you're coming from, say, just hypothetically calling out, like you were coming from a typically non-consulting or a non-entrepreneurial background, right? So try to say that okay, listen, I'm coming from finance. Again giving an example. I'm coming from finance, and I enjoy finance because that has a lot of analytical work, and I now want to move from accounting to strategy work. So I want to get into consulting because here are my skill sets, transferable skill sets, and this is what I really want to drive. So at least the adcoms know that it's an achievable goal. They know that you're clear, because 10 months is too short of a time to really explore what are the other ways. Of course, once you get in, you can explore other career options, but adcom should be comfortable that you have your backup plan ready, right? So that's why I would summarize that hey, have a little bit of specificity to your goals. So I think this pretty much summarizes. So if you bring these out through your essays, I think it'll be a pretty solid application. Natasha, you're on mute.
I think one of the points I do want to make is, unlike US schools, which across maybe 2 or 3 essays will give you about 1,000 words to really pitch in a lot of career goal related detail, as well as personal topics or motivational topics. I think INSEAD really gives you a lot of scope to talk about what is important to you, both on the career front as well as from a personal or motivational front. You're getting 4 essays, two of them at 500 words. You have a 400-word essay, you have a 300-word essay. So there's really a lot of scope for you to add context to not just your goals, but like you mentioned, with Rabina, the element of intentionality. How do you make rational choices? How have you faced decisions in your life? And on the motivational front, I think one of the elements that I really enjoy helping clients figure out for INSEAD is the element of success, failure. And if you realize, a lot of the questions are not just centered around success and failure, but they also want to understand how these circumstances impact your relationships, how you intentionally foster more positive relationships in the face of positive or negative circumstances. And I think that is a great way to bring in how you're going to contribute to the community. How are you going to be someone who leads from the front? A lot of those 4 pillars that we spoke about, they start, you start having like a wider canvas to really demonstrate all of these elements as part of the essays and make it more natural. So I think it's a brilliant way for someone to be able to talk about intentionality, relationship building, making choices that, like you mentioned at the start of this conversation, not just support personal ambition, but also impact others, and are you thinking about the insights that you derive every time you go through each stage of life? And I think that's a brilliant way for someone to add so much color and context to their motivation, to the way they think and perceive the world around them. So I think that's something INSEAD does really, really well. But having said that, I think the other element that I also want to cover, beyond of course the applications that they write, that where you have written material, is the video essays. Because INSEAD has this element where after you submit your application, you have 48 hours to really provide the school with video content, which is typically about two video essays, and then a third essay where you're writing an answer live to a question that is posed to you on screen. So I just want to spend a little time talking about that, because when we look at the two video essays, you have no guidelines to prepare in advance. You will have access to practice questions, but you're really presenting yourself, and you will have 45 seconds to prepare, and you'll have 60 seconds to answer those questions. So do you have any tips for people looking to answer those video questions first? What can they expect?
Yeah. Right, right. So this can get a bit nerving, but I would say nothing to be alarmed, because INSEAD is not looking at like a rehearsed or a very, where you can probably learn an answer and just kind of vomit it out on the spot. INSEAD is looking more for like authenticity, how you can react under pressure, and really your genuine self. Now that said, yeah, it's quite difficult to understand how can I put my genuine self forward. I would recommend, if I were in the candidate's place, I would really have my stories correct. And what I mean by that is really, find out experiences from my professional life, and really tie it to what values am I bringing out, right? So if it could be like any behavioral question, say, tell us of a time when you had difficulty XYZ. So I would at that time, probably I think it's a 20-second practice session, and then you have to speak for 1 minute. It's a short time to really think of the answer. So that's why have your answers ready beforehand, and just have them in a sense, okay, this is my difficulty story, or this is my achievement story, or this is my failure story. And in those you have to be really succinct. So make sure you give context and you bring the value out. So not just saying, okay, I failed here and there. What is important to say for a failure story is having that learning, right? What I learned from it and how I applied it to newer situations, right? If it's an achievement story, it doesn't need to sound like a bragging story. What did you really learn? Like maybe for achieving success, you really had to collaborate. So bring those values out. So I would
Yeah.
say, I during my time, I remember there was this 14 principles of Amazon, which and hence have like 14 stories through. And I think you're pretty sorted in the sense like any question asked, you have your values ready, and you can really make sure you practice beforehand, like within
Yeah.
1 minute if you're fitting in. So it's very important to be that. And I think just again, like reiterating, keep it very authentic. You don't have to have like a very high achieving story or something. In your own perspective, how did you live those values, uh, make an impact, have those
Yeah.
elements ready, and yeah, I think that
Yeah.
that should be sorted.
I think one of the things that I also want to just add to what you mentioned, like having your stories ready, is a really important part of interview preparation. And I'm glad you touched on it, because one of the things that we at the Red Pen typically tell applicants to do is to have a bank of life stories. Have your, every element that was important to you or that connects to your value system or to important traits. You want to have like a bank of stories ready, which we always ask individuals to write in like a star format, where they're able to recollect them in a particular format where you're setting the context, you're describing your actions, you're able to talk about outcomes. And this is, I think, something that would serve a lot of applicants well when they're actually doing the video essay and they have very little time to think. If they have already practiced a set of answers, or they've practiced a set of how they want to express themselves across a range of life incidents, it should make this process easier. And I think another piece that I would want to add as a tip is, especially with the video component being like a written component being added to the video section, where a prompt will flash on screen and then you have 5 minutes to communicate your answer, to type out your answer. Um, understanding how you want to express yourself is a key part of how you can answer that question effectively. Evidence is that that last answer, where you have to type an answer on screen, will also be some form of a behavioral question that is posed to you. And when what the school is really looking for is, how do you communicate a response? How do you communicate responding to or dealing with a particular situation? Now, in that moment, it will be something that you want to have your structure clear, because how you structure your thoughts will be an important part of how you answer that question effectively. So I think using the star format, where you're able to talk about setting context, talking about actions and intentional action, rational choices, and then being able to talk about outcomes, will be a will be a very, very key part of how you're able to answer effectively in a typed out format. So I think that's something that applicants this year need to know. It's something that's going to be very, very different in the way the school's looking at responses. A last thing that I want to spend maybe 2 minutes talking about is going to be the interview format, Mitrabina, because when individuals get their shortlist, I think with INSEAD has a very different way of interviewing as opposed to American schools, where an individual will be paired with two interviewers, not one interviewer. So they're going to effectively have two interactions if they're shortlisted for interview. So I just want to understand if you can set us some context for that. And again, if anyone has questions around it, add it to the chat box. I know we've answered a lot of the questions, but if anyone has questions related to some of the new information we're sharing, please let us know. So Mitrabina, just take it away. Anything around interviews you want to talk about?
Right. I really love the INSEAD's, the interview process because, rightly said, it's different than the US schools. And it's by two alums, again, through algorithms. Somehow magically you're paired with people who are relevant to your background in some or the other way. Yeah. And there's a good thing and a bad thing. I would say mostly good because, at least you are with like-minded people who can really understand your background and then they genuinely want to know more about you. And bad thing, I wouldn't say bad thing as such, but basically you also have to be prepared. So, you can't like again, it's good in a way that you have to be your most authentic self and not just, speak to somebody who doesn't understand your profession or who doesn't understand your background. Yeah. And I would say just getting to the core of the process, it's not like a very, how do you say, so INSEAD is probably I mean, I interview incoming candidates at the same time, so we are really told to make the candidates be comfortable, not like a grilling session, or we don't have like a script that we are supposed to read out and get those answers. Of course, at the end of the day, we definitely have to evaluate if the candidate is the right fit, but we are given the flexibility and the freedom to kind of, ask in our own way, right? And the good thing is that just be yourself. But at the same time, I would say it's not like an interview with your friend or a walk in the park interview. uh, pitch Prepare your pitch story, just like, you're pitching yourself for a business plan, something you're pitching for yourself, right? So what are your selling points? So, it's going to be a chat probably in their office location or at maybe a cafe or something. So have your pitch ready in the sense like, hey, this is me, this is my background, this is why I'm interested in MBA, this is why I'm interested in INSEAD, this is how I'll contribute to the class, and this is how I'll really be a valuable member of the community. Right? So those should be the takeaways at the end of the day, because when you're interacting with the INSEAD alum, they want to really see whether you're fitting into their close knit community at the end of the day. Yes or no? Because yes, you have qualified your application, you've impressed the adcom members. Are you really impressing the network that you're getting into? So that could be through various ways, either preparing a pitch or maybe kind of connecting on certain professional grounds or personal grounds. It could be anything. So I would say just have your understanding about your strengths and weaknesses, and be thorough and clear with your goals and the reasons for doing MBA from INSEAD and how you'll contribute to the network. Be very, very, very clear.
I think another element that I also want to mention around the interviews is I think we get this question very often where someone will ask us whether there's a benefit in doing an in person interview, or should they, if they have an option to do a virtual interview, will they be at a disadvantage? And I think the answer is really no. There is no advantage or disadvantage over choosing an in person format over a virtual format. I think you need to go with what is available to you at that point in time and not stress whether you're losing an opportunity by choosing one format over another. I do want to touch on some of the
Absolutely
questions
right.
that are that are there in the chat box. So I think one is, should I apply in round three? I think this is a question we've not answered. Should I apply in round three, or do you suggest R1 Jan intake? And I think I do want to answer this particular question because I think when you apply in round three, versus applying in round one, which is Jan of 27, these are two very very different program formats that you're applying to. If you're applying in Jan of 27, you need to think about whether you are someone who is looking at the internship opportunity seriously. Are you someone who's thinking of making a pivot? You'll need to understand why the January intake is going to be something suited to you. Should you apply in round three? If your application is ready in round three and you're ready to put in a competitive application, you can. However, you will need to realize that you are competing for a relatively lesser number of seats, open seats in the class. So you need to take a thought about, or have a thought about, whether you do want to apply in round three, or does Jan intake make sense if you are someone who's thinking of being at a stage of your career where you're thinking of pivoting industries, or you require that additional time to form additional connections, or reach out and take on another internship. Otherwise, you apply in round one, which is for the fall intake, in around August or September of the next year. So I think that's something to think about, not just in terms of timing, but about whether one format of the program will suit you better than the other. And I think application rounds, recommendation from a higher boss versus recommendation from an immediate superior. I think you've answered the question in you've answered yourself. You do need to take a recommendation from someone who knows you better. Taking a recommendation from the MD of an organization who has no idea what your day-to-day tasks would be would result in very, very generic feedback, which would not really help your candidature. It does not matter if your supervisor is an alum of the school. It does not matter if he has an MBA or not. But if he is someone who knows your role better, who will be able to speak with a higher degree of specificity on your strengths and areas of improvement, he is a better person to take a letter of recommendation from. Anything you want to add to that, Mithrubina?
Natasha, I would want to add on the rounds also. So,
Yes, please.
this could be important for somebody who's looking for scholarships. So, with
Yes.
every passing by rounds, I remember during my time, R3 also had scholarships. I need to check on that. But with every passing round, the scholarship pool is also diminished because, of course, in R1, most of the scholarships are given away to the candidates who deserve it. So lesser pool. So if scholarship is something important to you, then I would suggest maybe R3 need to again be a bit cautious that it's not like you might not get
Yeah.
any scholarship, you'll probably get a lesser scholarship than somebody who did an R1.
Yeah.
And as you are
Yeah.
rightly said, Natasha, it is very important because I think once you, if somebody knows the questions also, which is probably available online, even the questions will make you think that, oh, does my, CFO or, my super boss really know to answer these questions, how am I distinguished from my peers or, on those lines, right? So even if it's somebody immediate senior whose designation is not that important, it's really important that that person really vouches for you and kind of shows how you've evolved in the role and how or what impact you're really driving through your role. That is more important than designation.
Yeah, I do
Yeah,
agree.
Natasha.
And on the topic of scholarships, you do need to realize that scholarships or a scholarship portal will open to you once you have an invitation to interview. And the kind of scholarships that you can apply for are either based on achievement, where you've had like an excellent academic record, or there's a consistent trend of personal achievements. Or you can think about, do you have, or are you eligible to apply for diversity scholarships? So, based on what you bring to the classroom, either in terms of like your background or your work experience, or your profile. Are you someone who can apply for women's scholarships or leadership scholarships, or sometimes even geography or social impact scholarships? At the end of the day, you do need to realize that your eligibility for scholarships is something where you will be able to write to the school and demonstrate how you are differentiated from your peers. So even if you're applying for a women's scholarship, you will want to talk about not only your achievement, but what have you done in your career once you have been in positions of authority or positions where you can make a difference. What have you done to further that particular cause? So if you're applying for a scholarship that is rooted in diversity, or the kind of standing that you have, or achievement, it's also about talking to the school about what you've done with that achievement. What have you contributed or fed back or given back to your peer group or to society at large, to be able to really make a meaningful pitch for a scholarship. And I think that's something important to point out, because a scholarship is not allocated merely on the basis of financial need. There may be some consideration in certain cases, but by and large, a scholarship will be awarded to individuals who are really living those value systems, who are really who have a very strong sense of self, and are able to apply that for the betterment of others. So I think that's something that you need to think about when you're applying for a scholarship. But yes, we've reached the end of the hour, and I think we've answered the questions that we had. Um, Okay, so I'm glad it's been helpful to you, Shreyas. But yes, you need to think about why you need to pivot, and you do need to think about the kind of difference you want to make in the world. And I think what the thought that I'd like to end this particular conversation in is what Mitrabina said, that whenever you're talking about pitching yourself or pitching the kind of person that you are to the world, you want to talk about your achievements as well as your intentions in quantifiable terms. It's not enough to only tell them that you aim to make a difference or a significant difference, or you kind of quantify it in terms of comparing it with what you've done in the past, but you want to talk about what your ambition means, what is the scale of impact that you want to make, how do you hope to change the lives of others, whether through professional means or through social impact. But you need to give them a clear sense of what you plan for the future, how you think you will be able to get there, and why will INSEAD be that bridge between your pre-MBA career and the ambition you have post-MBA. Anything else you want to add, Mitrabina, before we close for the
That's
night?
fantastically summarized. I think nothing else to add.
Cool, cool. So, all the best to anyone who's applying. Our contact details will be there in the chat, and it's also there in the description of this video. If you want to reach out or you want to have a chat with me about your plans to apply to INSEAD, do reach out, and we can take that conversation forward. But right now, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Mitrabina. And yes, I think as always, INSEAD is a very popular topic and something we love talking about. So, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me, Natasha. It was a great session.
Thank you. See you. Bye bye.